We've Galera Cordia August Foilter Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deal Animal Rescue in West Limerick. Now, my very, very special guest today, I've been really looking forward to this interview, is Garda Sgt Andrew Geary. He's actually living in Ballyhooly near Fermoy, and he works as in the Garda Training Centre in Templemore here in Tipperary. Hello, Andrew, how are you?
Good, Mary, thanks for having me on.
Well, Andrew, it's an absolute pleasure. You have a fantastic story. For those who don't know, Andrew has been fighting the good fight on behalf of one of his identical twin sons, Callum, who was born profoundly deaf, and Andrew has been fighting the system and for 6 years. And before we start, I was looking at a piece in the Irish Examiner by Fergus Finlay, and I think he put it wonderfully. He said, Andrew Geary is a guard with a distinguished record. He is a patriot willing to do anything in the line of duty for his country. He and his wife Helen have 4 fine-looking sons, and they're resilient and strong. And he has been battling what seems like insuperable odds on behalf of one of his sons. He often says publicly, and said it to the Irish Examiner last April, again, I love my country and I can't understand why my country doesn't love my son. That's beautifully put, Andrew, and yeah. How much of that is really what you would actually believe?
Yeah, I think Fergus Finlay put it very well, and he captured our story very well in that article, and I'm very thankful to the various people in the media, Mary, because without the media, they're a central tenet of our democracy, and I'm very grateful, and our family is very grateful for the media telling our story and telling our legislators and our democracy that sometimes, unfortunately, families like ours are dragged into the pit, and you have to fight every minute of every day. Every door is bolted and locked. And just when you've one door open, that slams behind you and you're locked behind the next door. And it's, I'm a public servant myself, as you kindly put it there. And I firmly feel that Callum's life by accident of birth, as John Newman would put it, because he's deaf, it's almost like his path has been predestined before him. And I don't agree with that. And I can't rest in my bed at night thinking that his chance of success is defined by his deafness. I don't believe that, and our democracy is not supposed to believe that. I don't think it's any... Go on, Mary.
No, because Callum is a very bright young lad, and it's not that you're his father, so you're going to say that, but he is actually a very, very bright child, as are many deaf children who are falling between the cracks because of the lack of education. I'm a personal believer, and I'm a huge believer. There's deafness in my family. When my mum was deaf all her life, partially deaf, and when she had radium treatment, she went completely deaf and lost her voice. So, and there is, I have a deaf cousin. So I believe that it should be taught in primary schools from the earliest all the way through, and that it should be taught at academic level, academic sign. For children who want to be academics, who are only learning the basic sign all the way through their education. How is that helping them at all?
Yeah, and that's a huge bone of contention for me. Callum goes to a school for the deaf, yet there's no curriculum in Irish Sign Language. So you go to any school in this country, and straight away there's a curriculum in every subject. The Irish, there's a curriculum in Irish, a curriculum in English, curriculum in maths, yet he's a deaf child whose first language is Irish Sign Language, and it's not on the junior cert or leaving cert, as I outlined a few months ago on the Late Late Show, but even he goes to school for the deaf, and the only places you'll find curriculums, Mary, are on courses that you do in the evening, or courses that you do as PLC courses. I'm doing level 6 at the moment in Tralee. It's a 3 hours a week to do that. And none of our primary school teachers, bar 2 teachers that went to Trinity out of a High Court case in the noughties, have got to do anything near level 6 or level 8. Level 8 is where your teachers must be. That we don't allow a teacher into any other classroom to teach any language or through that language without a level 8 degree. And it's absolutely abhorrent. 100 years or more after the foundation of our state. Our third natural language. I have a degree in history and archaeology, and Irish Sign Language goes back to Ogham stones. You see your Ogham stones standing in a field, and Ogham stones, a lot of historians and archaeologists believe that that's a representation of sign language on the Ogham stone that is very similar to various sign language alphabets. And it's very hurtful as a parent, as a citizen, and as someone that really believes in our democracy. And it's absolutely no coincidence. People like John Hume, he's a teacher. Padraig Pearse was a teacher. They were people who are at the absolute fulcrum of our democracy, fulcrum of they're the people that we look up to as role models on our state. And from day one in the proclamation, it asked us to cherish all the children equally, and they promised. They promised citizenship from childhood, and that hasn't happened for Callum. His citizenship, he doesn't have full citizenship. Just his twin brother Donica does, but Callum doesn't have citizenship, and no one in our democracy can tell me our deaf citizens have full citizenship. They have got some form, but if you look at history, and you and I have discussed this over the week, our population was supposed to have been emancipated and freed by our Declaration of Independence and our home rule and all that, and the various campaigns, but we've left a huge cohort of our citizens behind. Our deaf children are just one part of that. A lot of our disabled citizens have to fight every day. As we were
talking yesterday with a councillor here in Limerick, the children that are going home to B&Bs and hotel rooms who haven't got a computer, and everyone has been told stay safe, stay home. There is no equality, there's no parity for children in this country, until every child has the same rights to an education, to the standard of their mental capacity. And Callum is obviously a bright child. You say he's on the same par as Donecha, but he's been kept back a year now in school, am I right? Because he hasn't got, for no other reason, but because he hasn't got an adequate sign language interpreter who can help him through all of the exams that are needed. We're here in Limerick with one of the best, probably the paramount teacher training colleges in the country for primary teachers, and Mary Immaculate. How important do you think it is that sign language should be part of the teacher training curriculum, that when they graduate as with the level 8, with the degree and the HDIP, that they are fully qualified sign language teachers, that they should be able to go into the classroom, and that every child in the classroom should be brought along with the deaf child, rather than the deaf child having to learn how to lip read, which is what they do here in this country first, is learn to lip read and then sign. In America, it's the opposite way around. They learn to sign first and then lip read. You said to me, Callum doesn't lip read either very well.
No. Well, lip reading in English, Mary, is very difficult. English is probably the most difficult language in the world because it's so soft on the lips. Even your best lip readers will only pick up 30 to 40% of what's actually said. The rest of it is guesswork. And for children, again, going back to your question about primary school teachers, there's no fault on the teachers in any shape or form. They're brilliant people. They've gone off and learned sign language on their own time, at their own expense, generally. But the state still doesn't understand this is a full language, full vocab, full lexicon, a beautiful language.
It's a beautiful
And
language.
they just need to understand that you can't learn this in part-time classes. To become fluent in language, to be able to teach through that language, takes somewhere, depending on your language ability, between 800 and 1,200 quality hours from an approved, fully qualified teacher. And you have to immerse yourself in that language again to be able to teach through that, like we do with our Irish, French, German, Spanish, Italian teachers. They have to go. And if you don't go and meet the culture who speak that language, you're never going to have the full reception skills. Same as our Irish teachers go to the Gaeltacht and have to go to the different Gaeltachts to pick up the different accents, pick up the different dialects that happens in sign language too. So we're not even expecting our teachers for Callum, because that's not going to happen. It's too late for him. We want the interpreter, our sign language teacher. Now, there is 4 deaf people training to become primary school teachers in Dublin City University at the moment. So, but they're going to come too late for him. There's a very small amount of deaf people that have become secondary school teachers. That's absolutely minimal. But the state still will not accept. I've read every research book that's published that comes out of whether that's America, England, Ireland. I've even found Japanese experts translated into English, Finnish into English. And I read those deaf pedagogy books and they all say the same thing about deaf children. You need the access to the curriculum through full fluency from the highest quality producers and receptors of that language. You can't have someone going in at the level that you and I were at first year and second year of Irish or French. You can't teach through that. And that's what they're forcing our teachers to do at the moment. And then they might put SNAs in that role. Again, how are they going to have the vocab to start talking about trigonometry, an isosceles triangle? Ask any of them to explain through sign language what a conjunction is and an adjective is. And this is all about one thing. I'm campaigning so hard because I believe in my son for the poetry he hasn't written yet. My son has got a beautiful mind, whether that's poetry comes through sign language, or through English. I'm not worried. He has got immense rhythm, immense language in his brain, only waiting to flow through his hands, whether that's in written form or through sign language. You've seen beautiful deaf choirs bring what a lot of people can't believe about that deaf people dance, that they sing through sign language. You've watched the deaf choirs in Limerick put just beautiful, sign language, together and to make something like a wedding, and, just that wow second. And that just brings that whole thing to life. And that's all I want for Callum. I just want him to have that opportunity to write that poetry, whether that's through sign language or English. I'm happy.
I mean, how important has Rose Aileen Ellis been on Strictly in the UK,
Brilliant.
proving how a deaf person can actually dance so beautifully and so much with the music without the ability to even hear the music. My cousin Tara, I sent you a video of her singing, performing at her wedding, her own wedding. She and her husband are profoundly deaf. Tara has never heard, and I teach at Irish dancing. She was a wonderful Irish dancer. As long as somebody was on the stage with her and she could stay with them, she could feel the rhythm in her feet, and and that to me is the ultimate in actually understanding music, is to be able to feel it through your body, not just hear it. It's one thing to have the oral ability to hear the music, it's another thing to actually feel it, and you can see that in Rose. And how important is that? That's obviously very important for people like you.
Role models are essential. Callum has to have deaf role models, and she definitely is one. There's another man, believe it or not, he won the American version of That back in 2016, Neil DeMarco. And his mother was on holidays in Ireland, down around where you live, and we met his mother on holidays. Just happened that we were in the Allowee Caves and at the sheepdog show there, and at the same day a busload of deaf Americans were on holidays. You should have seen Callum's eyes, that just exploded watching 30, 40, 50 people signing, even though it's a different sign language, American Sign Language. But we spent a good bit of that week with that family, with Neil DeMarco's mother, and there's plenty of role models in Ireland too, but they've all succeeded despite the system. They've smashed that glass ceiling. They've had to work 10 times harder than their counterpart. But Callum loves dancing. I'm glad you brought that up, Mary, because weddings haven't been part of our lives, unfortunately, in recent times.
Yeah.
Family weddings, he's the first person on the dance floor, last person off. He just loves dancing, and the same as your niece, he could feel the rhythm coming through.
But the thing about her was, judges would not know she was deaf. And I'm a judge, a dance judge, but you would not know she was deaf at all if somebody hadn't said to you, that little girl is deaf, because she was just on the beat. 100%, because she felt it through. And the sign language that she did with this school, with the Hands in Harmony choir for her own wedding, it broke the internet. It was just beautiful. And it's just such a miraculous and wonderful language. And I just think that it should be, certainly in the way that Irish has been pushed on us in primary and secondary in this country, and in tertiary education, you cannot teach in a primary school in this country, even if you never use Irish again in it, you cannot teach unless you have Irish. Why can't they say you cannot teach unless you have sign?
Yeah, it's I suppose I helped in a small way with the Irish Sign Language Act, the drafting of that, and we brought all those points up in negotiations or talks with the various government departments. Just didn't happen that way, Mary. I know it took Dublin City University and a personal friend of mine, Professor Elizabeth Matthews, about 15 years to get the programme up and running, to get deaf people to be allowed to become primary school teachers, because deaf children don't get to learn Irish. They're basically, it's taken off. It's never mentioned to you. It's just not on the hymn sheet. So then up till 2 years ago, they could never become primary school teachers. So their modules will include Irish Sign Language instead of Irish, which is a brilliant step forward. But then we are so far behind the likes of New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, who were doing this 25 years ago, who demonstrated that this deaf children can do absolutely anything. And in Finland, the deaf children, whether they have or don't have technology, they have the opportunity to go into a classroom, and there's two teachers, one hearing, one deaf, teaching the same curriculum side by side, which is beautiful.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, beautiful. And that again gives the children that opportunity to feel part of both worlds.
It's such a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it just shows what can be done.
I mean, it should be logical that there should be, when you look at Rose Ailing Ellis, and she has this sign language person there with her interpreting everything that's said during the show to her, and she can lip read. I mean, she can clearly lip read, wears the cochlear implants. Yeah. Not every child can wear the cochlear. Callum wear
nothing, no technology will ever work for Callum. He's missing his hearing nerves on both sides, and so digital hearing aid cochlear implant was off the menu straight away when they found that out. We did try something else. We traveled the world 10 years ago, and there was another pioneering device, didn't work in any shape. But Callum is so bright, he fooled experts in America, in Poland, and in England into thinking that the device was working. And again, he was born without hearing, and again, they thought he could hear because he is brilliant at reading people. They had to prove it each time by putting him under an anesthetic and doing double-blind tests to show it wasn't working, because he would look to see what the reaction was on your face when someone was speaking behind his back. But that again shows, like Tara, he'd have brilliant spatial awareness. You and I can see here, but if we could really concentrate, we can see as far back here. And that's the deaf have that brilliant spatial awareness that's part of Callum's life now, and we've all learned sign.
Andrew, it's very difficult, you know, not just for it's frustrating and isolating for the person themselves and exclusionary, but it's also, it has an effect, because I know that my dad was English and and he was very quietly spoken, and all my life my mum would say, "What's your dad saying?" And I'd have to repeat everything. It was like he was English and I was speaking in English and I was telling her what he was saying. It was like I was interpreting what he was saying to her, because she couldn't quite get it. And then when with the radium, she went completely deaf and non-verbal because she had throat cancer. So it was, you know, it was it affects the family as well.
It does. Yeah.
It probably affects the family more than the person as well, because you're watching.
Callum, yeah. You've hit the nail on the head. It's we insulate Callum from this. He knows nothing about this campaign. Doesn't need to know anything about it. He goes to school, loves his teacher and his friends. But again, it's absolutely exhausting. I have 2 jobs. I go and give 40 or 50 hours to Garda Sgt every week, and I have to give another 40 or 50 hours to campaigning. It's absolutely exhausting. Some nights I can't sleep. I'm so exhausted mentally and physically, but I made a commitment to our democracy. And I made that commitment a long, long time ago. I put on that uniform as a commitment to our country. I look at our flag in a very special way, and I'm a committed citizen, and I made a commitment to my son. And I'm going to ensure that our democracy recognises his citizenship. And if that takes every ounce of energy, the great people in our society that I look up to as role models had to sacrifice themselves. And if my country wants my sacrifice, they can have it. If they want me to burn myself out for my country, well then I'll do that for my country to make sure my son is part of this democracy, because it's a beautiful country and a beautiful people and a beautiful community. And one day they're going to fall so in love with my son that he will never know any of this has happened.
You've written many letters to Norma Foley. Is it like beating your head off a stone wall?
Well, I'm 6 years writing to the Department of Education. You've seen numerous newspaper articles, and we've written numerous. We were very lucky. There's great legislators in this country. You know, there's been a lot of questions asked in the Dáil. I know the replies off by heart. It's the same letter is issued. In fairness, in recent weeks and recent months, I have seen a little shift. Unfortunately, we've had to bare our souls to do that, and it's very draining. And I do take I'm very grateful for the opportunities the media has presented us with in being able to tell our stories, that people may listen, may want to learn, and will possibly support us and understand the road we're on. And it's mind-blowingly slow. The pause buttons, sometimes I don't believe happen in our Oireachtas. I believe they're happening elsewhere. And because again, people just do not understand, this is a beautiful language. It's a language, not a system of communication. This is a full language, the same as English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, you know, any other language in the world. It's the same. There's no difference. It has the same amount of verbs, conjunctions, adjectives you need. And I am still only learning. I'm years at this, and I would not go. They say, people often say to me, "You're brilliant." I'm not. I'm rubbish. And I know that, because I wouldn't let myself go into a primary school and try to interpret what happens in junior infants, senior infants, or first class, because that child deserves someone at the absolute full fluency of an interpreter. Same as what everyone saw on TV all year about the COVID. That's what's needed. And now there's no if, buts, or maybes, and I won't stop campaigning till that happens.
It's a very creative language. It's probably more creative than there's probably even as much, if not more, nuances in sign language than there are in when one is pronouncing words in the spoken language, because you're dealing with the facial expressions that people have to use when they're signing, as well as using the hand gestures, and it's it's very, very lyrical.
Yeah.
To me, it's
Yeah.
a very poetic. When you say Callum loves poetry, and I would imagine that sign would be the perfect language. I would imagine that poetry done through sign is probably the most closely connected language to the poem than actually even verbal expression of the poem.
Yeah.
Do you know?
And meaning making is a huge part of sign language. And again, that's one weakness in my particular ability in sign language, because maybe of my stony face due to my job as a policeman. I'm not used to moving these muscles on my face, and a lot of meaning making, changing the meanings of different words happens on the face. So you need to have the different movements with the eyes, eyebrows, lots of grammar and structure, is actually, as you said there, happens on the face. Callum's a brilliant storyteller, and I hope people got to see that on the Late Late Show. Like, he can, and if I had tried to interpret, Mary, what he was saying on the Late Late Show, that story wouldn't have been brought to life.
Yeah.
Romeo Callaghan and Amanda Coogan brought that story to life for Ryan Tubridy and for the country, and that's the difference. You need someone that can bring that language to life, and that's why you need some of the highest quality. And Callum is just the most amazing storyteller, writes great stories, tells even better stories. And you saw, like, the twins are equally into telling stories. And what I loved about that is the same as any other twin brothers in the country, in the world. One started the story and one was able to finish. And that's what language is about.
Like Jedward. I mean, you'd often see Jedward, John would start this, Edward would start a story and John would finish it for him.
They just have that connection and that link, that they're just at one, and that's what, again, going back to what I'm at, a great country has great equality. And if you don't have that equality or that even access, or if you make that fight so hard for our common citizens, people shy away and they lock themselves away in an island. Well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I want my son to live in the deaf world, because that's a beautiful world, but I also want him to reach his potential in the hearing world. And that potential can't be defined by a classroom or what someone in the Department of Education feels. He'll define that. The same as you or I, we had access to education, and that's what gave us the opportunities to meet today, you and me. And if you put all your effort into doing everything in your life, then you've the opportunity to reach potential, but only if the barriers are so insurmountable. Well then, but I don't care about the outcome. But all I want is Callum to reach his potential. That's all. Once he defines that potential, I'm happy with that. But I will not accept the state defining that potential.
How difficult do you think how many problems has COVID brought to light for the deaf community? I'm thinking with the mask situation and this obsession with people wearing masks. And I'm saying to myself, from day one, I always thought, my God, how does somebody who cannot lip read, Callum, in the sense that if he's dealing with somebody who's signing, he can still continue a conversation. But for somebody who relies on seeing somebody's face, being able to read their expression, read their lips, all that was prevented.
As I said to you, Mary, the grammar, the grammar is on the face, so he is missing all the grammar on this part of the face. So he does watch the lips to get to differentiate two different signs. So he would be watching that, maybe not to lip read the word, but to differentiate two different signs. Or for your general deaf population, it was extremely difficult. In the isolation that it would have created, it took them away from the services, and it made accessing but the deaf are used to living on that island. They call that deaf space. And unfortunately, our deaf almost live on an island, on our island already. The only good thing that came out of COVID for the deaf community was NEFIT and the sign language interpreters. It gave our country an understanding of what the interpreters can do and the level that they're at. And it gave the deaf a feeling of belonging for the first time in a national emergency. We've seen them the odd time with a huge storm coming our way, but for the deaf, watching those interpreters on the screen every day made them feel a part of our nation for the first time in a very, very, very long time, maybe the first time ever. And that wouldn't have happened without the Irish Sign Language Act, because a few of us noticed that. And we made contact with RT. I'm sure the deaf organisations did too, to make sure that that happened. If the Irish Sign Language Act hadn't been passed in December 2017 and commenced in December 2020, that might not have happened to the same degree. We had to make sure, but then these other public services gave their broadcasts and didn't. It was a huge movement in both the UK and USA, showing we're ahead of those two democracies, at least in our public broadcasting. Trump wouldn't put an interpreter, refused, and Boris Johnson the same. So in both countries, they had this "Where's the Interpreter" campaign. And the difference between Joe Biden, immediately, first press conference he gave about COVID, the interpreters alongside him. Boris Johnson never did so. If you don't show respect from the very top, that respect must come from the Taoiseach, President, the various government departments, whether that's justice, education, and health. If you don't have it, those three pillars.
It's not a difficult thing to do, to have a sign language interpreter when you have the facilities to do it, to have somebody there signing for the benefit of the deaf. I can't understand why a big issue has to be made of it, or why, you know, insofar as you'd have subtitles underneath a film for people of a different in a different language. How difficult is it to have somebody that's proficient and eminently qualified, or with a level 8, as you're saying? Can I bring you back to the beginning a minute? At what stage did you realize from the outset that there was something wrong with Callum that doctors seem to have missed?
Well, I suppose we were looking at some other stuff. He was, like, we've 2 older boys. I love my 4 boys passionately, and we had seen his older 2 brothers, who are 18 and 16 respectively now, so the twins are nearly 13. So we had seen 2 older boys go through. We knew at the babbling stage, the walking stage, and Callum was a bit slower to reach those milestones naturally enough. Donica had really taken off verbally, lots of talking going on in the house, and we knew something was up. So, like, he had passed the home hearing test that used to be there before newborn screening, but we knew something was up, and it wasn't until he was 1 year and 3 quarters that the first bit of a test was done. The system was so amateurish at the time, Mary, you can only imagine how bad it was. And then at 2 1/4, he was confirmed as being profoundly deaf. They were talking about cochlear implants and stuff like that, and you're saying to yourself, that's the first time in our lives that we had ever met. Callum was the first deaf person in our lives. My mother says she can remember me playing with deaf children when I was very young. I don't have that memory myself, but she does. She can remember it well. And then we're told and would you believe it, he was late to walk because he's also missing his balance nerves as well as his hearing nerves. So he's a real doer, goer. Like, we were told when we found out that he had no hearing or balance nerves, he'd never cycle a bike. What's Callum's favorite pastime? Cycling. Loves cycling, especially greenways. We were up your way recently on the Limerick Greenway. We were in the Waterford one last year, and he loves cycling. But he began walking the week that we found out he was deaf, and because he had to learn to walk very differently to every other child. And so it was a shock to us. We didn't know what to do. We went to newborn, or newly diagnosed weekend with other parents in the same boat as ourselves, and it was frightening. You know, a deaf man told us some stuff that weekend that really frightened us, what his parents did to him. They never turned subtitles on the TV, never learned sign language. His family became the deaf world. He hated his parents, and that was a real hurtful weekend for us. We just got the shock of our lives. We were in bits coming home. And then at that stage, we were beginning to learn sign language. We went back to Beaumont because the cochlear implant was very much on the menu at this stage. And we were being reassured by the medical world, oh, it's okay, he'll learn to talk in here. There's no issues here. Continue learning your sign language. But and then we found out, that was January, 2011, June 2011, we found out that he wasn't a candidate for the cochlear implant, and that you might have to travel the world for this other technology. We did for 6 months. We were between England, Warsaw, America, and Italy. He got implanted in England, and ultimately after a year, we just had to give up on that device. It just never worked. And all the time, thank God, we'd continue learning the sign language and started meeting deaf people and stuff like that. And Helen's brilliant at sign. She's in the Cork version of the Hands and Harmony Choir, and Callum and Donica, his twin, go along to that as well. And it's just, listen, he's been an absolute gift, Mary. There's absolutely no doubt. He's brought a beautiful language to me. He's given me a beautiful people, a beautiful culture, a history that's tragic but beautiful. But to tell you the truth, I don't often feel worthy to be his father, and that's how I feel, and that's why I work so hard.
You try so hard. Is that why you try so hard to be worthy of?
Yeah, he's given me everything. Like all my 4 boys have given me every gift in life, and a lot of the time I just say, listen, you've given me all these gifts, and what have I given you back? I can't even give you an education.
But you're giving him, you're giving him time, Andrew, and also you're giving him the efforts, the mammoth efforts that you're going to give him the world that he deserves and to give him the life he deserves. I don't think there's any greater gift a father can give is to fight for their child. And I saw one article where you said you sell everything you had to get him the education that he deserves. You shouldn't have to. In Ireland, where we're supposed to be a first world country, where we built half built a hospital that colossally rose in price to over €1 billion, and they could waste money on that, but they can't put it into something like what is a minority of children in this country who are deaf. Surely they could have the latest of everything.
You'd imagine that, but sometimes that's not the way our democracy is built. Our democracy sometimes doesn't look forward. It's not a forward-facing democracy all the time. Like, if the state was to invest 100,000 in Callum's education, could save the state €2 million between disability allowance, medical cards, transport, free transfers, and rent allowance. If he can't find gainful employment, I know he will. Listen, I know my son will succeed. I've absolutely no doubt he will. But I want him to reach his potential and him to decide what that is, not for that definition to be placed on him by someone else's barrier. He's the resource. The resource is not cents and euros. The child is the resource to the state. If you go in and contribute to the economy, he can give maybe that he, over the course of his life, he would be giving, everything back and more. And like that's what a democracy is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about cherishing every child equally. It's about every citizen.
They're lovely words, Andrew. They're lovely words, cherishing the child equally. But if they're not carried out, then that's all they are words. And I mean, you're a member of Garda Sgt. You're a sergeant, Garda Sergeant in the Irish police force, for anyone who doesn't know what Garda Sgt. Means. How difficult is it I would imagine that any public servant, certainly any public servant, it should be compulsory for them to be able to communicate. And I would certainly believe that anyone in Garda Sgt. particularly when you're reading the Miranda rights or something to somebody, or you're stopping somebody in traffic or for a violation of any kind, and they can't hear you, and you don't know if they can hear you or not, and misunderstandings happen when somebody can't communicate, or they're handcuffed so they can't sign and they can't speak. And how important do you think it is that it should be in on Garda Síochána, that everyone should be?
It's there. Every part of the public service is supposed to have an access policy for deaf and hard of hearing citizens, and especially regarding Irish Sign Language use. It's there in Section 6 of the Irish Sign Language Act. Every part. The National Disability Authority did a huge survey at the beginning of this year, and unfortunately it didn't come out great for many parts of the public service. A lot of the public service didn't even know the Irish Sign Language Act was there, and then the other parts who did know it was there didn't know what was in it. And then some of the minority of public services, I suppose, didn't have many plans in place to fully comply with the Irish Sign Language Act. I'm working on a number of projects. Like, at the end of the day, I'm only a sergeant. I'm not a boss in the Garda Síochána. I'm involved with a number of projects at home and abroad. I'm part of a network of police officers in the UK, and we talk about deaf issues. I'm part of one or two groups here, but the change needs to happen yesterday. Our democracy is almost 100 years old, and our police force on Garda Síochána is almost 100 years old. We're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. There's been brilliant work done in other police forces in the past. There's been probably good work done here in particular circles that maybe other parts of the country don't know about. I know there's some great community officers around the country engaging very well with their deaf communities, but we need to replicate that in every part, in every town where the deaf signer is. And again, knowing where the line in the sand is, that if, as you said, someone's arrested or someone's a victim of crime, you bring in the expert, you bring in the interpreter. You know where the line in the sand is between your memorandum of rights under UNCRPD or your rights under the other EU legislation or national legislation, and that goes across into the HSE. I know a deaf lady who was in hospital recently for 4 or 5 days, and who is primary Irish Sign Language user, never saw an interpreter for any of those 5 days, and went through an absolutely horrific time.
My cousin Tara was in hospital with a serious condition, and I was there. I don't have sign, and she and her husband were chatting away absolutely normally. The nurses and the doctors were fantastic. None of them had sign, but then they did bring in somebody eventually to actually work with her through sign. But it was, it was isolating for a while for her. But it also, I suppose, she just had Timmy, and he had her, and the two of them were in their own little world. They didn't need anybody else, just the two of them.
But there's horrific stories out there, Mary.
But she's lucky.
There's horrific stories in hospitals where children had to interpret for their adult parents, or close family members had to go and tell or ask or answer the most horrific questions in every part of the public service. I know there's a huge campaign in Kerry at the moment to try to get the South Dock service deaf friendly, and that's all across the country. Or like I've deaf friends that have hearing children, and the hearing children have to go to the parent-teacher meeting and interpret for the parents. That's wrong. Like that's not right. Or I know people who had the worst news possible delivered to them just because there was no fund. There's no excuse now. There's an Irish Sign Language Act there, and that's it.
And with COVID and that, and people not allowed, family members not allowed into hospitals, and you could have somebody who was deaf in a hospital, and they're not allowed, the only people into them who can actually interpret for them, and they're already isolated enough without being in a place where nobody understands what they're trying to communicate. the whole system needs to be. But Andrew, you're involved with the United Nations trying to push this even further, trying to get attention to it at UN level, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I was part of the UNCRC the last time Ireland was before that review, and some questions were asked, but it wasn't held because of COVID the next time. But again, you have to fly that flag. I'm very nationalistic, I'm very patriotic, and that's what hurts me enormously, that I had to go there and put my own country on trial before the UN to explain the total inadequate nature of deaf rights and sign language rights within our democracy, and especially in my case for deaf children. Because I'm hoping, Mary, that if we manage to open the door for Callum, that other children can come through the door with him. It's useless if we only open the door for him. I need for that door to come open for, for other children. We friends who have deaf kids that are at school, and they need to be able to do their full leaving cert as well. And we need to ensure that the errors of that's what history is supposed to be there for. And Mary McAleese, our president, wrote a brilliant piece on the back of a book. Her brother was deaf, and what he went through. Those errors are being repeated over and over, a whole 2 generations probably later. And those errors of the past must be repaired, and to make sure the hopes of the present are realised, or else history continues to repeat itself. Truth will triumph, but truth, unfortunately, has to go through many trials to triumph. And unfortunately, those trials at the moment are being imposed on my family on a daily basis. We have been insulted so many times over our 6 years. My parents educated me, Helen's parents educated her, and we've been insulted over and over again. This is our son. We know his potential. And we are running out of our batteries, but I won't give up, because I know truth one day. You look at one of my great heroes, Vicky Phelan. You look at that lady, and she made a brilliant presentation at a UL alumni event last August.
Amazing. She's absolutely amazing.
Amazing. But you look at the pain our democracy put that lady and her other leader and the other leaders in her movement through. And it was only because of the High Court again. And unfortunately now, my state, my country, my democracy, my son's country, where he's supposed to be a citizen, is going to force us to put everything on the line to go into that High Court. You go into the High Court and it's going to cost you huge money every day for every hearing. You're looking at 15,000 to 30,000 euros per day. I don't have that money, but I'm going to have to find it for my son, because he deserves it.
That you have to, you could make the case, Andrew, that this is a form. We talk about this. We talk about lately a lot in the media. Well, certainly in social media, about medical apartheid, and that, if anything, is a disability apartheid when your son is being prevented, and the silence from our government ministers and those in power to actually change that for Callum and people like Callum and Tara, is silence is actually a form of, and reticence is a form of agreeance in it and allowing it to happen. Your son, through no fault of his own, and because he hasn't been given the same educational opportunities as other children, able-bodied children, it is a form, I think, of apartheid.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be accepted. It wouldn't be accepted in any other form of. I mean, if you said to somebody that they were being discriminated because of the color of their skin or their race or their ethnicity, you'd say that was apartheid. Why are people not outraged that there are children in this country who cannot, through no fault of their own, have the same rights as every other child?
I'll tell you why, Mary. Because the parents are so burnt out, they can't get outside the front door, because this country is built on the back of volunteers, carers, advocates, community workers. We are nothing. This democracy would not exist without, and those people are so burnt out, they can barely raise their voice at election time because they are given 100% to their day job to pay for whatever care that special person in their life requires. But I will say there are good people. I have not given up on our legislators. Minister Anne Rabbitte, a TD, Padraig O'Sullivan, has come into our lives in recent times. Senator Mark Daly, Cathaoirleach of the Shannon, has always been there for the deaf community in recent years. I will give him that. And I also have to thank two people I never met in my life for asking questions in the Dáil recently about Callum, Donegal Geary and Marion Harkin. Never met them. And they asked some of the, like 14 minutes of debate was taken up recently in the Dáil about disability issues, thanks to Padraig O'Sullivan and Minister Anne Rabbitte. And in fairness, Minister Niall Collins did phone me as well last week. So there is good people out there. And our local TDs, you know, Sean Sherlock and Dave Stanton have made contact with me over the years and supported us in different ways. So we can't tar everyone with the one brush.
But one would imagine that they would be in a position to highlight it. I mean, you talk about the Dáil, for instance. I haven't once seen a Dáil, I could be wrong, but I haven't once seen a Dáil meeting with a sign language interpreter.
There was around the time the Irish Sign Language Act passed. There was in 2017. It was, and there was some debates. Now there would be some certain Oireachtas debates would be put on the news channel with Irish Sign Language interpreters as well. It's not access, but so I won't say it never happened. It did happen. But again, our democracy won't change until a deaf person's in there. There was a deaf MEP.
That's it. It needs.
We need people in wheelchairs inside in the Dáil. We need blind people inside in the Dáil. We need people that have disabilities, but at the moment they can't achieve their potential because, as you said, there's almost like a medical apartheid system. But again, I know carers, they have contacted me and parents in recent weeks and months. They're so burnt out, Mary. They don't have the energy to scratch themselves. And sometimes they ask me to help them draft stuff to write to their boards of management or make applications on behalf of their children. And then there's like a mother rang me a few weeks ago after a tweet. And again, Tracy is from Wexford. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her here. Tracy rang me offering help to me. Tracy is again one of those brilliant carers, the unsung heroes, the heroes of our democracy, because without her, none of us would be standing. Her son has every special need you can imagine, and she only gets 2 5-hour slots once a month, and she can't leave the home on either slot. But I'm lucky, Mary. And again, that's, as I said to you earlier in the week, I wanted to be a secondary school teacher, and I ended up in Garda Sgt. That's the only reason I'm standing, because I believe 24 years in the Guards has given me an extra bit of resilience, and I still believe in our country, and I am very, very proud of my country, but I think we can do better. And I believe that the choices you make in your life, the people you help, the people you love, your belief and faith. I have a deep faith in people. I have a huge faith and belief in humanity. There's good people continue to come into our lives. I have a deep faith in God, but I also believe people of every faith have given me assistance, and people of no faith have given me equal assistance in my life. And those good people continue coming in.
How important do you think it is to, when I say faith, I don't necessarily believe, I suppose, in faith in a God or faith in a higher power, but faith or belief, hope, because, I mean, my own research, I've interviewed so many survivors of genocide, a woman who was on death row because she refused to give up her Christianity. And she and her new unborn baby, they were waiting for the baby to be born before she would be executed. And her other baby was imprisoned with her. And all of them said the one thing, survivors of the Holocaust I've interviewed, and all of them said one thing, the only thing that kept them going was hope. that things were going to get better, because the minute they lost hope, they said the people who lost hope were the ones who died. The people who held on to that sense of hope, that things are going to get better. I will be able to make a difference. Our government will come to their senses. Something will happen. I will go into the Dáil as a TD and fight for the rights of the deaf community. How important is hope in all of Andrew Geary's progress so far, journey?
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, that's definitely, like, you can't continue on unless you believe there's a better future there. Absolutely. And I look back at my time as a child, and when I was around Callum's age, look what happened in Eastern Europe. I was born in 1975, and the whole of Eastern Europe became a democracy without blood being shed. And you always have to have hope. And I do hope, through hard work, honest, humble, hard work, that things will change. But you have to believe in people. If you give up your belief in people, well, then you're at nothing. You can't do it all on your own. You have to believe in people. You have to have hope in light, in good people, and hope that those people come into your life. Unfortunately, I've had to embrace a huge amount of pain, and a lot of that pain hurts. But some of that pain is good, because it has helped me change and hopefully improve as a human being too. And you have to embrace that pain. And that pain, as I said, it hurts, but hope and pain run parallel paths with you on a journey like this. But I at the same time, Mary, this might sound strange, but I do feel very lucky.
Yeah.
If you can understand that, because beautiful people have come into our lives, and I do feel lucky to those people. I don't know why sometimes. I honestly can't understand why, but a lot of these people seem to see hope in me, or seem to believe in me. And I don't understand why a lot of the time people say, listen, you're giving us hope. And I can't see that. But that's
they say nothing happens unless only that it happens for a reason. And all these cliches like God fits the back for the burden, and you talk about wanting to be a teacher, and I can honestly see that had you taken the role of a teacher, you would have been an extraordinary teacher, because you come across as being an incredible people person, articulate and liking to talk, and liking to listen, and liking to help. And the three qualities that are fundamental, I think, in a good teacher. But do you think that your path now is leaning towards politics and going down the road, being an advocate in the Dáil for the deaf and the disabled?
I don't know if I have that ability. You're not the first person who's interviewed me recently who said, listen, you should be in politics. I've a number of years to serve in my own job. I have to give that 120%. I come to work, and thank you. I would have loved to have been a teacher, and I love children. I really,
I don't. In the training college.
Yeah. I suppose I do in my present job, but like that, I was a community guard for a few years, and going in and out of those classrooms in primary and secondary school was among the highlights of my career, just listening to the kids. And as you said there, you can't just teach, you have to get on the floor with them and listen, because my children have taught me more than any learning I've ever done at school, college, university, or on the job. I've learned more from children than I will ever learn from adults, and they've taught me to be humble. They've taught me to live in the moment. And my son has, along with all my 4 sons, have given me a reason to want to make this a better place. And
but what Callum has taught you as well, probably, that a lot of parents and a lot of people mightn't have been taught, say, with children who were not deaf, is the ability to really listen to their children, to look eye contact, the importance of actually looking at the person you're talking to. So often in life, I think we tend to talk away from people. We're doing so many other things in our lives. We don't look somebody head on and speak slowly and focus on them as the center of your universe while that communication is happening. With you and Callum, you have to be 100% face to face with him or to have that communication, and that helps you in other aspects, I would imagine, in the Garda Sgt and in the training centre in Templemore, and that you find that you're more connected with people than most people would be, because you're treating them almost as if they're the most important person that you have to talk to. Do you find that?
Yeah, well, again, all my children have improved me as a human being. I do believe that, and I do believe I try to learn. I try to learn from the people I meet in my life, and I know that they can teach me something when they come into my life. They come into that for a reason, and like my wife is the real hero of this piece, Mary.
Yeah.
You should come and see my wife. She doesn't want to do any of the media campaigning stuff, but she's the hero of this piece because she's so brilliant at sign language. She and Callum can chat for hours. The two of them are like two peas in a pod, exactly as you're saying. They're locked in a zone, chatting, and it's just absolutely beautiful to watch. It's just, from watching it there as a proud father, proud husband, proud family person, and like that. And it's just, you saw in the late show how proud I am of my two boys, and I'm as proud of my four boys, and as I am of that. And yes, they've, like Callum, along with his brothers, have made me a better human being. And if engaging with the deaf community, people would never believe this, but my real personality is a really quiet, shy, introverted person. No one knows that. No one believes that.
Out of your comfort zone.
And but that's me. I like being on my own. Like but this is my mission, and I am his father, and this is what I must do. I know I'm lucky because, again, as I said, my parents educated me. Helen's parents educated her well, and in Garda Sgt, bits and pieces I picked up in UCC and UL along the way have all helped as well, because you have to be. Unfortunately, the system, the democracy we live in, it's beautiful. It is absolutely, this country, I just love it too much, let's say, so much. And from the top of Donegal to the bottom of Wexford, from even the parts that are a separate country, from Antrim back down to Dingle again, I just love traveling this country. I love meeting the people in this country, and I just want that for my son. I just want him to, I don't want him to grow up an adult and feel a chip on his shoulder to say, listen, my country didn't educate me. My country didn't care about me. My prayer in life is that he never learns about this time, ever. I don't want him to know anything about this. If I can get that interpreter in the classroom, get him an education, I hope no one ever tells him. I hope he never hears about this, that he can go into primary and secondary school and on to third level, and no one will ever mention Andrew Geary or your dad's a great man. I don't ever want anyone to say that to him.
I just looked at, Fergus Finley's article, one of the headings that had, I suppose, a profound impact on me was, and I suppose it comes back to what I say about if you stand by and you watch as others suffer, you're just as guilty by your inability or your unwillingness to become part of the solution, rather than to, in some ways, to respect the or rather to accept what is happening. He said that one of the headings was, we haven't tolerated inequality, we've insisted on it. I found that absolutely stark stark and absolutely everything that I fully believe, that, you know, people can sit back and say, oh, look, I didn't do this and I didn't prevent a sign language from coming into schools, or I didn't have anything to do with that. But your refusal or your reticence in going out and fighting the good fight, like Andrew Geary and many more like you, Andrew, who have got up and gone out and said, well, maybe I'm not deaf, maybe I'm not disabled, but one member of my family could be in the future, or my grandchild or my great-grandchild, and I'll fight now for the children that maybe I'm not in that position, but it could be something that's really close to me now the next time. And I think it's very important that we all fight injustice where we see it, even if the injustice isn't directly at us. We are guilty of it when we do nothing. And that, and I think that we haven't tolerated inequality. We've insisted on it. We basically agreed with the whole inequality that's in this country and any country when we do nothing.
Well, I suppose it goes back to our constitution. The proclamation was the stronger document in some ways than our constitution, because that was a more rights-based document than our constitution. And maybe we need to look at the rights-based democracies across the world. I will defend some of the people, Mary. A lot of people are burnt out. They work very tough jobs and maybe they just don't have the energy after their 40, 50 or 60-hour week. I love volunteering. I just enjoy that part of my life, whether that's Cork Deaf Association, Dogs for Disabled. I was involved with Deaf Enterprises. I was always involved as the community things before I ever joined the Guards. Just something I enjoy. Just, I believe you need to give to get back, and to get back is just a buzz in your soul. It just warms your soul. And I love when people actually don't say thank you, because then I can pay it forward, you know. Yeah. And that's even better, because, but I do think we need to look at the word, and a friend of mine said it there recently. He was giving a talk, and what the word amateur, we forgot. Amateur means the love of something. It doesn't mean that you're rubbish at that thing or you don't know what you're doing, but, and we forgot that. Yeah, our muinterish, I just love that Irish word, muinter na tira. It's another love of mine. Muinterish, when a community comes as one, like the sign for community and sign language is just a beautiful sign. When a community becomes one, it's just, like we've all seen it. Like we can feel it on those big match days, you know, when Limerick win in All Ireland, just that feeling when a community feels as one, or Ireland win a big match.
And you're saying that as a Corkman. Yeah. We have a Corkman here in the station with me from Mallow, and he's very sour when Limerick win. He says, if you won as much as Cork now, if you won as much as Cork, you wouldn't be boasting. He said he'd used to it.
But the feeling, you know, that feeling when a community becomes one, and that's something I strive for. I just love those moments in life when you can feel it in a room, in a classroom, in any place, when that community becomes one, even if it's just for a second. And I love writing letters of thanks to people. You know, I keep them to myself. You know, maybe a famous person has passed away, write to their wife, say thank you to that wife, because I would be nothing without my wife. People say, where do you get the energy or strength? I'm nothing without my family. I'm nothing without my country. And I am nothing without. And people say, why do you keep going? Because I love my family, but I love my country. Our flag, I just love the story behind Thomas Francis Meagher bringing that flag home from France. Women gave him that flag. Women are often forgotten in history. Women gave him that flag.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they brought that flag home. He was given that. Flew it first for your Dacia listeners in Waterford. And again, like he went, you know, banished from Ireland. He went and emancipated people in America, you know, during the American Civil War. And there's like he wrote some amazing pieces. And I just think that we have to look, we have some brilliant role models in our history. Like, again, Countess Markievicz, I'd ask people to read her history. Or if there's one man I love, and I've told you about him, Mary we spoke about him during the week, Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty. What he did.
I love Monsignor Hugh
What
O'Flaherty.
he did, or if you want to go off island, people who are of my age, one of the heroes from, one of the Chariots of Fire film, Eric Liddell. He's just, but again, he was nothing without his wife. And like we've seen it with President Mary McAleese, again, it's just those moments in time. Like you have to hold on to those moments, and like these moments have charged my battery, and sometimes it's fairly empty, but you get up again.
But when you look at the 1916 surrender photograph, and you see Nurse Farrell's, all you see is a little piece of her foot, and the rest of her was airbrushed out. But for the fact, and no one would have known she even existed, but for the fact that there was a piece of her foot left in the photograph after it was airbrushed out. It just beggars belief, what you say about women being.
Her name just eludes me for a second, Mary. The Scottish lady, the teacher from Scotland that came down, and she was fought with the Irish Citizens Army. She was with Countess Markievicz as well, and again she was a sharpshooter. I never came across her story in history. I was just going through Google someday, looking up some history, and next this history came up. It's SK, I think I can't think of off the top of my head now, but you have to look, and I see history books are being better written now, because I can see that through my own kids reading their history books. But I just love history. I just love picking up history books, and just not that I see any of myself in any of those people, but sacrifice is part of democracy, Mary, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just, it's just, I was trying to see there if I could find her name. I can't remember her name, the teacher from Scotland, but I'm sure we'll find it out later. But, it is strength and determination, and you seem to have it in abundance. What's next now for you, Andrew, with this?
Well, I suppose
you were in the High Court during the week, weren't you?
No, we're trying to get into the High Court, and our campaign is three-pronged at the moment. We're through you and people like you, Mary, telling our story in the media, continuing stuff, hopefully stuff happening in the Dáil, and I do believe, unfortunately, we are going to have go through a full fight in the High Court. Unfortunately, I don't have a time or date for that fight, but and if we need to go to Europe, Mary, we'll have to go to European Court of Human Rights if it takes that. But every day wasted of Callum's education is a day he can't get back. Like, he's been at school, primary school now, for nearly 9 years. Of that 9 years, he had full access for 2 years in Cork, and we did give him an opportunity to go to Dublin for 6 months. So that's all. Of 9 years, he's had 2.5 years at most of access. And anyone that sent a child away to school will tell you it's like your left arm is missing, and it's just something that didn't work out for us. But we've been battling, and again, only by fluke, as I told you, Mary, that I discovered the work of Dr. Mark Marshak in August 2015. I wouldn't know any of this. Someone out there is sending positive vibes. Someone, maybe one of our ancestors, Cornelius Geary, my great-great-grandfather, 1903, was deaf, and he...
I was going to ask you that, Andrew, did you ever find out that it was hereditary in any way?
Yeah. So it's possibly on both our sides, that it comes out every few generations.
1903.
For the Geary family. And but he could read and write when all of his hearing family couldn't. He was the only literate person in his family, because deaf people were teaching deaf people at the turn of the 20th century and at the end of the 19th century. So that's the strange thing. So Cornelius Geary, 120 years ago, possibly got a better education than his great-great-great-grandson. Now, Callum was delighted when we discovered that he had a deaf relative. He was over the moon. It was Helen's sister, Joan, who lives in Limerick, discovered that he's brilliant. I studied genealogy once upon a time, but Joan is the real expert. She did the family trees on both Helen's and my side, and The geneticist feels it's probably in Helen's line as well, but we're proud of our deafness, Mary. Strange as that may sound,
no, I
we're
can
very
understand
proud of
that
our deafness.
perfectly. I can understand that perfectly, and I know that there are many deaf people who would not want cochlear implants or anything because they would feel that what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with me. Are you saying that there's something wrong, that I have to fit into your world? Why can't you come into my world? And I can understand that.
And again, if Callum is to have children, that'll be their choice.
All we're asking here is that people are helped to communicate through, and that the barrier of hearing and deafness is no longer a barrier, that we can bridge that divide through sign language.
And that's all. We're just looking. All I keep saying is all we need is a bridge, and that bridge is needed for Callum's real and true potential. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm just looking for the bridge. He only needs it for a certain part of his life. You're only at school, maybe 8 years in primary school, 6 years in secondary school. Third level looks after itself as regards access to different programs there. So that's what the state has been asked. And there's parents like us from the top of Donegal to the bottom of Dingle, across to Wexford, and up to County Louth again, and swing all around again, who are begging. We're like beggars on the street, begging for a real access to our child's education. And lots of us, like that, have, had to get on our hands and knees and grovel at the mercy of the state. My wife had to give up any type, like she is Callum's educator in chief. The school do a great job. However, Helen is the person that puts all that jigsaw together every evening to make sure everything was understood that happened that day. And that's harder and harder to do when he goes to secondary school. Like there's certain subjects I was good at in school, but again, will we have the words to put into sign language, or sign language to put into words when he's doing complex stuff in secondary school? That's where we need that fully qualified interpreter. And even when children go beyond the first year or two in school, we all know what they do inside in school. I know that COVID did me a big favor. I saw all their curriculums back to front, the 4 boys at home. And you need to go into secondary school with full literacy in a language. Most of us that got on in secondary school went in there probably top of our class in primary school, and then saw, listen, there's other kids way brighter than me inside here, and that was me anyway. And other kids thrive in secondary school, to take off there. But Callum is years behind his twin brother, and that's nothing got to do with his IQ or ability. We know that because we've got reports to prove that.
He's been slipping through the cracks through no fault of yours, certainly through no fault of yours and Helen's. But Andrew, I could talk to you all day about this. It's a fascinating subject. It's something that's really close to my heart. I mean, I and my neighbours did a Christmas CD a few years ago. 15 of us from the one neighbourhood in St. Lawrence Park in Limerick, up near Geary. We did a Christmas CD, and we raised €3,500 for the School for the Deaf. And we were really proud of that. We presented it to Tara, who was up in the school, and they put money into a sensory room for the school. So it is something that's very, very close to my heart. I, as an only child, had to see my mother completely deaf and not able to speak either. And from being a very, very passionate conversationalist to not being able to speak or not being able to hear, just her whole world started to shrink. And I see that, and that's why I suppose I was gravitated towards having you on the show. But Andrew, I don't want to take up any more of your.
No. Listen, it's been brilliant talking to you. Brilliant, and really, I and I deeply appreciate your time, Mary, and thanks for your empathy and understanding today. And it's but just for your listeners and the people watching, Mary, I love my life. I love my sons. Callum's an absolute gift, and campaigning is hard work, but I'm doing this for my country, and I'm doing it for my son. And if I can be of service to my family and my country, I can't give this life any greater gift than give something back.
You can't give any greater gift than loving your children, and you absolutely have love in abundance. Andrew Geary, Garda Sergeant Andrew Geary, just in case I happen to meet you on the road someday and you're fining me or something, it's Garda Sergeant Andrew Geary from Cork. Thank you so much for being my guest. Shindera leis an clár. That's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacuna of Day. Wallam tu galer chiacana sanas agus gra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus good day, Shipslán. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Mary. It's a great day.
Bye.
Bye.